June 15, 2006. Southern Moscow, Russia. Marina Moskaleva clocks out from a supermarket where she worked the late shift. She agrees to take a short walk through the wooded paths of Bitsa Park with a co-worker she's known for years. Before leaving, she texts her teenage son. A phone number, a name, and one line, just in case something happens. That night, she doesn't come home. The next morning, her body is found near a pond in the park. Her skull has been shattered. Fragments of a vodka bottle are shoved into the wound. Her son shows police the message. The man she had met was Alexander Pichushkin, and in his apartment, police would soon find a chessboard. 64 squares, 61 marked, one for every life he claimed. What the police discovered was more than evidence. It was a system, a plan, a game. In this video, we unravel how a grocery clerk turned a forest park into a killing ground, how a childhood injury fractured his ability to feel empathy, and how checkmate came 3 moves early, stopping Pichushkin's game of murder at 61. Every pattern has a beginning. For Alexander Pichushkin, it may have started with a playground accident in Mytishchi, a commuter suburb northeast of Moscow, late 1970s. A 4-year-old boy, an iron swing, a chain that snaps taut, a seat that whips back and smashes into his forehead. The impact fractured Alexander Pichushkin's developing frontal lobe, an area critical for impulse control, empathy, and judgment. Doctors would later note that injuries like this, especially early in life, can blunt a child's fear of consequences and mute emotional responses. His mother said he returned from the playground silent, different, as if something had turned off. That silence never quite lifted. At home, her new partner never called Alexander his son. The boy grew up knowing this was not his family. The only person who treated him like he mattered was his grandfather, a retired railway worker with a quiet love for chess. The old man believed the game might channel the boy's impulsive energy, train him in patience, in consequences, in thinking ahead. Most evenings were spent at the kitchen table, pipe smoke curling through the air, the chessboard between them, pawns clicking softly into place. But when Alexander turned 14, his grandfather died unexpectedly. The teenager took it as a second betrayal after the father who had abandoned him as an infant, and something shifted. At school, classmates began to avoid him. Teachers noted a pattern of sudden violence, sucker punches, outbursts, eyes gone glassy. Then came the dogs. Stray animals began turning up with shattered limbs. Forensic psychologists would later call this the start mechanism of something much darker. By the time he entered the state-run speech and behavioral school number 138, Alexander was already slipping beyond reach. He didn't just act alone, he preferred it. 16 years later, that same boy will sit alone at the kitchen table, clicking bottle caps onto a chessboard, one for each life taken. It started with a dog, a cocker spaniel, young and eager, the first creature Alexander ever bonded with. When the dog died unexpectedly, something inside him didn't break. It sparked. There was no sadness, only a flicker of pleasure. The death didn't scare him, it thrilled him. From that moment, Alexander began to rehearse death, not with weapons or strangers, yet, but in thoughts, in fantasies. He skipped school and wandered the edges of Bitsa Park, staring into storm drains, wondering. In vocational school, he made a friend, Mikhail Odiychuk. Quiet, loyal. They studied together, walked home together, and trusted each other, until one afternoon they talked about killing. What if you could do it? Get away with it? End a life and vanish? Alexander suggested it. Mikhail laughed. He assumed it was a joke. It wasn't. Over the next few days, they planned it. Location, timing, how to make the body disappear. A stranger, a drunk, somewhere deep in Bitsa Park. Alexander first proposed a hammer, something precise, something he knew from carpentry class. But days before the plan, Mikhail backed out. He said it was madness, told Alexander to stop. That was the shift. And maybe, just maybe, Alexander resented how easily Mikhail had walked away. Alexander later said, "He wasn't strong enough. He couldn't kill, so I did it for him." On July 27th, 1992, the two walked deep into the park. Alexander set Mikhail on a bench, circled behind him, and slipped a nylon cord around his neck. He pulled. Once. Twice. Mikhail barely resisted. He just fell forward, and his body was dumped into a storm drain. That night, Alexander undressed, sat down with a 48-page notebook and wrote, Number 1. Mikhail Odiychuk. First kill is like first love. I didn't expect it to feel this good. I am strong. I can kill. And then, he waited. Not from guilt, but from fear. Footsteps in the stairwell made him freeze. Phone calls, police sirens, the worried look on his mother's face. Everything felt like exposure. For months, he lived inside that tension. But nothing happened. The police shelved the case. They ignored the classmates' warning about Alexander. Mikhail became another missing boy in a city full of them. Alexander's plan had worked. Bitsa Park had swallowed its first body, but not its last. Nine years. That's how long it took for the fear to fade, for the tension to dissolve, for Pichushkin to kill again. In 2001, Alexander is 27 years old. He still walks Bitsa Park, drinks vodka on benches, still stares into drains. But now, the hesitation is gone. The voice that once whispered, "Wait," has gone silent. The second kill comes easy. This time, it's a stranger, a drinker alone on a bench in Bitsa Park. They share a bottle, a few words. Then, as the man leans forward, Alexander slips a nylon cord around his neck. One pull, two. A soft thud. The body drops beside the bench, then down into the drain. And then another. And another. By mid-2002, the killing has a rhythm, a routine. He lures men, often elderly or alcoholic, with the promise of vodka. Sometimes he tells them he's mourning a dog, that he buried it that morning, that he doesn't want to drink alone. He drinks with them, jokes with them. Then, when their guard is down, he strikes. Some he strangles, others he bludgeons with a hammer. Early on, he uses a standard carpenter's hammer, but the wood absorbs too much of the shock, too soft. So he upgrades to a full metal head. Precise, efficient, reusable. He keeps the weapon wrapped in a plastic bag inside his jacket. Not hidden, just accessible. After every kill, he washes the hammer in his bathtub. Then he scrubs the blood from his clothes and waits. He kills at dusk, at night, in fog. Always in Bitsa Park, always with vodka. In 2002 alone, he kills 14 people. 3 of them are women. And by now, he's begun leaving things behind. Broken vodka bottles, fragments of glass, embedded in the wounds. It's not a mistake, it's a message, a signature, a way to say this wasn't rage, it was craft. Bitsa Park had swallowed its first victim 9 years earlier. Now, it's becoming a cemetery. His kills had rhythm. His routine worked, until 3 lives interrupted his pattern. They weren't supposed to survive, but they did. And every one of them left a crack in his plan. Maria Viricheva was the first, in spring 2002. He offered her vodka, said he'd just buried his dog. Then came the hammer. She woke up in a storm drain, jaw shattered, skull broken, climbing out in a blur of blood and disbelief. She told the police everything. names, faces, even the exact spot in Bitsa Park. But they didn't believe her. An officer reportedly told her, "You're drunk. Stop making things up." Days later, she was pressured into retracting her statement. The second was Mikhail Lobov, later the same year. He was 13. Pichushkin threw him into a drain after beating him unconscious, but somehow the boy crawled out, barefoot, bleeding, dazed. He staggered home and collapsed in front of his parents. The hospital stitched him up, but no one followed up. No investigation, no search of Bitsa Park, no connection made. The third, Konstantin Polikarpov, in 2003. A neighbor, a regular drinking partner. Pichushkin pushed him into the same shaft as all the others. But this time, the blow missed its mark. Polikarpov came to, alive, confused, soaked, and climbed out. He never went to the police. He thought he'd simply fallen in drunk. 3 survived, 2 tried to speak. 1 said nothing, but none were heard. They called them accidents. One by one, the bodies surfaced in the sewage canals and overflow outlets of southern Moscow. Drowning, said the coroner. Slipped, said the police. No pattern, no killer. At the time, Moscow saw 5 to 6 murders a day. One more bloated corpse pulled from the river didn't raise alarms, especially if it looked like a drunk who fell in. Many of the victims were found far from where they'd been killed. Some had traveled over 6 kilometers through the city's stormwater tunnels, flushed out near the Kuryanovo wastewater treatment plant, or snacked in grates along the Moskva River. There were no autopsies, no context, just death, misfiled and forgotten. But Alexander Pichushkin was paying attention. He selected each storm drain carefully, deep vertical shafts hidden in the woods of Bitsa Park. He knew what the drains would do. They'd hide his work, carry it away. He kept his distance and followed the news. Each headline confirmed what he already knew. No investigation, no pressure. Just a city losing people, one by one, unnoticed. As fear spread, explanations multiplied. Some residents blamed alcohol, others blamed gangs. One theory stuck: Chechen slave hunters. Supposedly, they were abducting alcoholics and vagrants to work in illegal camps in the Caucasus. It was nonsense, but it made more sense than a single man killing with this kind of efficiency. Meanwhile, investigators made arrests. In 2002, a local forester was detained and interrogated for hours. Later, another man was charged after being caught near one of the dump sites. Both were innocent. Both were eventually released. But for Pichushkin, it was confirmation. In his mind, this wasn't a mistake. It was a win. Proof that he could mislead them, outthink them, stay ahead. He later said, "I read everything they wrote. They were right next to me, and I was right under their noses." But eventually, something shifted. Being invisible wasn't enough anymore. He wanted recognition. He wanted credit. He wanted Moscow to know it had been him all along. "I was almost like God," Pichushkin said calmly, almost proudly. "I alone decided who lived and who died." For him, murder wasn't an impulse. It was a belief system, a structure, a game. And like any game, it needed rules, progress, a way to keep score. So he created one. In his apartment, police found a battered wooden chessboard. Every square had its own marker. 61 of the 64 squares were filled. Each one stood for a life taken. His goal was clear: to surpass Russia's most infamous killer, Andrei Chikatilo, with 56 confirmed victims. Not just to outkill him, but to outdo him, to be remembered, to be feared, to be king of the board. And 64 wasn't the end. He already had plans to switch to a larger board, a 10 by 10 checkers grid, the Russian variant called Shashki. 100 squares, 100 victims. He saw no reason to stop. Pichushkin claimed it wasn't about power, but in his confession he admitted It gave me life. Each cap was mine. I'd move it, and I'd feel it again. The killing, the moment, the control. That's why I needed more. In the end, there were only 3 squares left. 3 moves he never made. 3 pieces that never came. On paper, Alexander Pichushkin lived a quiet life. He worked in a grocery store, loading boxes and restocking shelves, kept to himself, and was mostly on time. Neighbors called him a polite giant. He held the door, offered to carry bags, didn't talk much, but smiled, nodded, seemed decent enough. He lived with his mother in a 2-room apartment on Khersonskaya Street. They shared a bedroom. His sister, her husband, and their child occupied the other. His mother believed he was quiet, maybe a little lost, but harmless. She didn't even know where he really worked. When she asked about the blood on his clothes, he said it came from a part-time job at a meat plant, and she believed him. He gave her an explanation. She didn't question it, not then, not ever. His sister thought he never brought anyone home, but neighbors recalled seeing strange men enter the building, always arriving alone, always drunk, never the same twice. Whether any of them ever entered the apartment is unclear. She later said she saw nothing. So did his mother. Most of his victims were already invisible. Alcoholics, drifters, men no one really knew. And when someone invisible disappears, who would notice? He kept the apartment clean, washed his hammer in the bathtub, scrubbed his clothes before bed. Then he'd wake up and go back to work, like nothing had happened. Twice he was fired for drinking on the job, but he was never violent, never loud, just a quiet man with quiet habits. In 2005, Pichushkin's pattern began to shift. He no longer tried to hide the bodies. For years, they had vanished into storm drains, swallowed, carried away, and forgotten. Now they remained, left where they fell, out in the open, in the grass, along footpaths, next to benches. Often, a broken vodka bottle was left behind, jammed into the skull, not by chance. It was a message, a pattern, repeated again and again until someone noticed. This wasn't carelessness, it was escalation. He wanted the bodies to be found, the pattern to be recognized, and the credit to be his. 2 innocent men had been arrested in earlier years for crimes he had committed. He'd read about it in the newspapers. It made him feel invisible, ignored, and angry. So he began to leave things behind. Not by accident, but with purpose. He wanted to be noticed. Then came Marina Moskaleva. She was a co-worker, one of the few who actually knew his name. They planned a walk through Bitsa Park. He offered vodka. Before she left, Marina sent a text to her teenage son. It contained the phone number of the man she was meeting. Just in case something happens, she wrote. Later that evening, her body was found near a pond in the park. Her son showed the police the message. The number led straight to Alexander Pichushkin. And his wicked game was about to end. 3 squares early. On the morning of June 16, 2006, around 5 a.m., investigators entered apartment 357 on Khersonskaya Street. They found Alexander Pichushkin asleep in bed. He didn't resist when they woke him up. Instead, he started to confess almost immediately, not just to the murder of Marina Moskaleva, but to many others. He spoke calmly, offering names, dates, and details. He described the methods, the locations, the weapons, and the logic behind. Detectives had expected denial. Instead, they received a chronology. When asked how many people he had killed, his answer shifted. First 61, then 62, eventually 63. He wasn't uncertain, only selective. He said he regretted nothing. What unsettled the investigators most was not the scale of the killings, but how methodically he spoke about them. There was no hesitation, no remorse, just structure. He expressed only one frustration, that he hadn't completed the board, not all 64. 49 murders would eventually be confirmed in court, but by then the number barely mattered. The story he had told had already reshaped the investigation and how the country would remember his name. Before his conviction, Pichushkin was transferred to the Serbsky Center in Moscow for psychiatric evaluation. He showed no signs of confusion, no remorse, and no impulse to deny what he had done. The official diagnosis was rare but chilling: homicidomania, an obsessive compulsion to kill. Combined with schizotypal personality disorder, the profile suggested not psychosis, but a calculated internal logic. He knew what he was doing. He just didn't care. He was declared criminally responsible and sentenced to life imprisonment. In 2007, he was transferred to Polyarnaya Sova, the polar owl colony in northern Siberia. It is one of Russia's most secure and isolated prisons. Prisoners there spend 23 hours a day in near total isolation. One former warden put it simply: there is only one way out of here, in a box. But if the world had expected Pichushkin to vanish into silence, it was wrong. Over the years, he granted interviews, replied to letters, and described himself as the embodiment of justice. In 2017, he reportedly exchanged letters with a woman named Natalia. They announced an engagement, but the prison authorities blocked the marriage before it could take place. In 2024, Russian media reported that his health had deteriorated. His mother said he no longer looked like himself, but she also admitted, "I never really knew who he was." After his arrest, she burned every photograph of him, packed his belongings into a box, and removed him not just from her home, but from her life. Today, Alexander Pichushkin remains in solitary confinement in a prison that was built to be forgotten. He is alive, and he will die where he is. He wanted to fill 64 squares. He made it to 61, but he wasn't done, not in his mind. He had already imagined a new board, Shashki, Russia's 100-square version of checkers. It was never about stopping. It was about scaling. His motives were documented, diagnosed, dissected, but never fully understood. Today, there are 344 surveillance cameras inside Bitsa Park as part of Moscow's Safe City initiative, with a vast security network of over 230,000 cameras equipped with live facial recognition, AI-supported analysis, and full integration with law enforcement. Every unexplained death is now checked for microglass fragments, unusual wound patterns, and matched against weeks of time-stamped CCTV footage. A response not to one man, but to years of missed connections. Pichushkin's goal was to eclipse Andrei Chikatilo, the Soviet-era serial killer who confessed to 56 murders, involving children, necrophilia, and cannibalism, before he was executed with a bullet to the back of the head in 1994. To Pichushkin, that number became a benchmark. According to him, he reached 61, but in court, only 49 murders were proven. So the question remains: did he truly surpass Russia's most infamous killer, or just believe he did? Click here to dive into the case of Andrei Chikatilo, the man history remembers as the Butcher of Rostov. And don't forget to subscribe to East Crime Stories for more true crime cases from Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union, where decades of societal upheaval created perfect conditions for some of history's most notorious crimes.